Welcome, everyone. Glad to see everyone here for this panel. My name is Sean Caulfield, and I'm a Centennial Professor in the Department of Art and Design, and I'm going to be chairing this session. And as you know, it's a session focused on creative research and its response to COVID. And we'll be looking at that both in terms of a kind of thematic response, but also in terms of how artists are kind of altering the work in response to the challenges of COVID. To get started, I just want to start with a brief land acknowledgement. I guess I'm on Treaty 6 territory, although of course this is happening across the country. So more broadly, I'd like to acknowledge the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities. We have three panelists today, and I'll start by just introducing them. And then after that, each panelist will speak for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then hopefully we have some time for some questions and dialogue. So the first panelist is Jennifer Willett. Dr. Jennifer Willett is a Canadian research chair in the School of Creative Arts at the University of Windsor. Willett is an internationally recognized artist in the emerging field of bioart. Her work resides at the intersection of art, science, and explores notion of representation, the body, ecologies, and interspecies interrelations in the biotechnological field. In 2009, she opened the first biological art lab in Canada called Incubator, hybrid laboratory at the intersection of art, science, and ecology at the University of Windsor. In July 2011, she completed BioArt Camp, a project that involved hosting 20 artists, scientists, and students at the Banff Center for the Arts, where they built a portable BioArt lab and conducted experiments in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. So thanks, Jennifer. Looking forward to your talk. The next speaker is Owen Underhill. Owen Underhill is a Canadian composer and conductor who is the artistic director of the Turning Point Ensemble, a large professional chamber ensemble dedicated to 20th and 21st century music, and a faculty member at the School for the Contemporary Arts at Simon Fraser University. Among his recent compositions are Bee Studies from 2019, a song cycle based on the poems of Renault Sarojini Saklikar for soprano and large ensemble, and He is Flying from 2020, a work for two Ahu and Seng written as part of a dance project with the Way When Danced. He is the past president of the Canadian Music Centre and the current D Pro Tem of the Faculty of Communications, Arts and Technology, Simon Fraser University. And then finally, we have Renelta Arluck. Renelta is a Inuvi Alouette, Cree Dene from Northwest Territories, raised by her grandparents on the trap line until school age. For over 20 years, Renelta has been part of or initiated the creation of Indigenous theatre across Canada and overseas. Renelta founded Ackpic Theatre, the only professional Indigenous theatre company in the Northwest Territories. Ackpic Theatre strives to flourish in the northern climate it reflects by developing, mentoring, and producing performance-based work that is Northern Indigenous inspired and created. Renelta is currently Director of Indigenous Arts at the Banff Center for the Arts and Creativity. She earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts acting degree from the University of Alberta, the first Indigenous woman and the first Inuk to graduate from this reputable program. Renelta is also the first Inuk and Indigenous woman to direct at the Stratford Festival, where she received the Festival Tyrone Guthrie Derek F. Mitchell Artistic Directors Award. So again, thanks very much to all our panelists for doing this. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Jennifer, and I guess I'll start by sharing my screen.
Thank you, Sean.
Yep. And just give me a moment. Can you all see that?
Sean's in charge of the slides, so he's going to click through for me.
All right.
So, thank you very much for having me. My name is Dr. Jennifer Willett. I'm an associate professor in the School of Creative Arts at the University of Windsor. I'm a Canada Research Chair in Art, Science, and Ecology, and I'm the director of Incubator Art Lab. I am also at home, as many of you are. So my presentation today is called Canadian Art in the Age of COVID-19, The View from Here, my bedroom, office, studio, lab in Windsor, Ontario. And this is a picture of the desk I'm sitting at now. It is in my bedroom because I gave one of our daughters my office 2 months before the pandemic struck. And I can see a pile of dirty laundry from here. And that really has affected the way that I've engaged in my art practice, how I run my research group. I should say, I run a BSL level 2 bioart laboratory at the University of Windsor. But we're currently doing that same work in our homes, in our kitchens, our bathrooms, and in our backyards. So this is also reflective of the project that I've been working on with Sean, where we are curating a website for the Royal Society of Canada that will highlight some of the Canadian artistic responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to show you some images of work that I've been looking at, and then I'm going to show you some of the work that I've been doing. So next slide. So this is one of my favorite pieces I've been watching evolve throughout the pandemic. This is a dad, Hannah. I actually did my PhD with a dad at Concordia University, and he's a photographer. He lives in Vancouver, and he's been photographing people, or actually videoing people, but asking them to stand still as if they were posing for a photograph, and asking them their feelings of this time of pandemic and the sort of social isolation that they're exhibiting. And it's a really beautiful series. And a portrait, maybe even a historical portrait for generations to come of all of the people who are sort of enduring this time. Next slide, please. This is the work by Elaine Whittaker. Now, Elaine has been working on art and science, and particularly viruses, for a good 10 or 15 years. So when I first reached out to Elaine to ask her if I could include this work, we were laughing that she'd finally hit her peak time as an artist when the pandemic hit. So her work, previous work, has been really taking off and has had all sorts of international exposure. But her current work is really also deeply affected by her period of time of socialization, and then some of her own health challenges, not COVID related, that are really keeping her very, very secluded during this time of isolation. So she's doing these impression prints right now of sort of like virus-like forms or contaminant-like forms in her domestic space. Next slide, please. This is Ruth Cutland, an amazing Indigenous artist who does all sorts of bead work and has historically, again, beaded viruses and different microorganisms. And so again, another artist who has sort of come into their time. And so this is one piece from her response series where the masks have been beaded with the viruses. Next slide, please. So I can't talk about art or the pandemic without understanding it as an intersectional issue, right? So, so often people talk about the pandemic or the virus as this isolated event, but I think that we all are learning that it is really interconnected and that we're not all having the same experience of this time. So I felt I couldn't discuss art in the age of pandemic without addressing Black Lives Matters. It's an essential component of the transformation that we are all undergoing all over the planet right now, an integrated experience of COVID-19. So this is Simone Elizabeth Saunders, and she's actually just graduating with her BFA right now. She's a spectacular fibers artist who's been doing these beautiful portraits of Black Lives Matters protesters using sort of like a carpet making technology. Next slide, please. I think also we can all see that there has been a form of racism expressing itself in our culture as people of Asian descent, and particularly Chinese populations, are experiencing a lot of anger, well-placed anger around the origin story of this pandemic. So I think it's also really important to look at artists from those cultural backgrounds and how they are expressing themselves in this time of pandemic. So this is Shelley Zhang, and the piece is called Only Way to Survive. Thank you. Next slide. Zoom, we were just talking about this in the green room. Zoom has become the new hottest art form. I think we're all doing a little bit of Zoom art. This is a piece by Brendan Fernandez. They're rehearsing. And this is a piece that they were preparing for the Art Gallery of Ontario. I would also like to state that most of these pieces I have not seen in real life. In fact, all of them, I have seen them all from the position of this funny little chair in my home, office, bedroom, lab situation. Next piece, please. So my experience of art in the age of pandemic, I have twin daughters who are 5 years old. So most of the art that I have been making is domestic family engagement projects. This is My Little Pony / unicorn that we made with paper mache when schools were shut down and we were at home with them for a number of months. Next slide, please. Strangely, while home with small children, I've also taken on a lot of activities that might be considered women's work or domestic labor. And a lot of those activities I learned were designed in a way that you could care for children and be creative at the same time. So I had not done embroidery since I was a teenager with my grandmother. And so I started taking up embroidering lab coats. I do have this laboratory, and so I was thinking I would do all these lab coats and then I would bring them back into the lab for performances later. That was hugely optimistic. I thought I would whip a couple of those out and we'd be going back to work soon. Next slide, please. Got to go the other way. So my project started becoming more elaborate. First of all, on the top left there, you can see a video work I did with my assistant, Dominica Mediati, who's an amazing animator. And we collaborated on a piece called Calling All Untethered Organisms. And I got thinking about all these viruses sort of floating around the atmosphere, these parasitic viruses waiting for a host to cohabitate with and to sort of bloom into life. And I got thinking that maybe we feel a lot like that as well. We were just sort of in this stasis floating place where space and time did not seem to have as much relevance as it had before. And so it's sort of a poetic piece that explores those relations. On the right, you can see the beginning of a project called COVID Suit. I am a bioartist, so I happen to have some hazmat suits in the basement during lockdown. And I started drawing viruses and the molecular patterns of COVID-19 onto the suit. And then on the bottom left here, also I have some gas masks and whatnot. So we started designing things that are going to become 3D prints that will attach themselves to the masks and can become sculptural costume forms, performative art objects. Next slide, please. So I started performing this character, and I have these performance characters who are often me, but they're parts of me. So I call this person COVID Suit Mom. And she's stuck at home. She's really bored. She's also a scientist, and so she's trying to do work from home, and very similar to the story I'm just telling you. And I've devised this COVID hazmat suit that then sort of maybe makes physical the sort of fear and anxiety that we have around COVID-19 and our fear of being outside and in public places. So I started doing miniature performances where I would wear this suit shopping or out and rolling around town in Windsor. I started collaborating with a photographer, videographer named Justin Elliott, who is responsible for all of these photos. And we're now just in the editing phase of a video that will go with this. So this is one of probably 100 shoots that we're now developing into an online exhibition. Next slide, please. I started roping my kids into my projects, and I have to say, up until now, they have played zero role in my artwork. My spouse made me promise when we decided to have kids that I would not turn them into a bioart project, that I could. But we've just really felt that this idea again of this these moms who are trying to work and care for kids was just such an essential component of one narrow aspect of the COVID-19 experience that we really wanted to include them. Plus they loved the outfits and they loved running around up and down town with me doing these photo shoots. Next one, please. And this is one other one from that series. I live in Windsor, Ontario, and we're right on the border with the US. And so a lot of my experience is also looking across the river at Detroit and feeling really worried for our neighbors, but also fear of opening borders and those types of things. So there's sort of worry and fear tied together. Next slide, please. So then I started doing more, well then what happens is we all started getting gigs online, right? Because we were like, okay, we better do something about this. So this was very exciting. This was for the MIT Bio Summit, and they asked me to come and do a gratitude offering for the organisms in the lab. And it was a really great opportunity for me to perform with Zoom and to maybe play out some of these narratives that I was talking about the relationships that we have with other organisms on the planet, other organisms in the lab, and now with this virus that we're sort of trying to learn how to cohabitate with. Next slide, please. So I convinced my university to let me go into the lab late at night, which took a little bit of paperwork because everything was closed. And I performed this sort of lament, this long poetry lament for all the other organisms that we had culled earlier in the season, a lament for the students, a lament for the contentious relationship we were having with this new virus, but also like maybe like a mourning tale, because really acknowledging that this too shall end and that everything ends. And it sort of ends in this crescendo where I talk about, you know, how the sun will turn into a red dwarf and we'll all be vaporized. So to sort of keep that in perspective. I think by that point I've been locked up for quite some time. Next slide, please. So now we're all professionalizing these sort of online relationships to one another. So on the one hand here, I have the IOTA Institute, which we are collaborating with, creating a Zoom bioart workshop series. And we have all different bioartists from all over the world giving at-home workshops in biotechnology. And on the right here is Science Gallery Detroit, who I'm just doing a workshop for them right now that will be launching on December 2nd online. And next slide. So downstairs right now, I'm doing a video shoot where I'm teaching people how to make, we made this little paper puppet house. It's like a diorama, but it is also our lab. And I worked on it with my lab group via Zoom. It's a beautiful bespoke lab. It has all the equipment drawn on the inside and then this sort of like theater front on the outside. And then myself and all my students have been doing these strange bioart performances with the paper theater, all the things we would like to do in the lab. So one of my students burnt the lab down. One of my students grew a fungus in the lab. I had another student who collaborated with her children and they grew chia pets in the lab. They put a lab in a Tupperware container and filled it up with water and made a video of it. I'm putting like pudding and things like that into my lab. Next slide. So that's it. That's my report. This is Canadian art in the age of COVID-19. The view from here, my bedroom, office, studio, and lab in Windsor, Ontario. Thank you very much, Sean.
Great, Jennifer. That was great. Thank you.
So COVID continues to be profoundly disruptive locally, nationally, internationally, in our personal lives, professional lives, and to artists, artistic organizations, and followers of the arts everywhere, really. And it's particularly disruptive to live performance in areas of dance, music, and theater, and any forms of live performance. Unfortunately, this disruption is likely to continue for some years through the re-startup period and in a post-pandemic era where audiences may not be willing to attend as live events as much as they did in the past. Of course, there are new opportunities for digital presentations, but it is certainly changed everybody's lives on multiple levels. And I'm also in my basement, by the way. Let's go to the next slide. So just before I start talking about Turning Point Ensemble, I would say also as a composer, composers often work for months at a time creating compositions. The payoff, of course, is when you get to a premiere and then the work takes on a new life and comes to life. For composers now, in general, there aren't any premieres if you're writing live performance works or larger live performance works. So that's been my experience as well. I had a large choral work, which I was looking forward to being premiered in April. And of course, that performance didn't happen. But I am now composing. I'm finding myself, my kind of response is to write smaller works and more intimate works that are not necessarily for particular performances while other things are on hold. And now I'm going to talk about the Turning Point Ensemble. So it's a large chamber ensemble. It's a bit like a small chamber orchestra. And we perform music of the past 100 years, also through new music. We also do quite a bit of collaboration with dance, theater, moving image. So we do quite a lot of quite elaborate collaborative works. And we often connect music of the past to music of the present day. We do quite a bit of commissioning as well. We've done cross-cultural work with world music ensembles here in Vancouver, and also we've done a number of projects with Kwakwaka'wakw and other First Nations groups. So let's move to the next slide. So the effect on Turning Point Ensemble was that when the pandemic hit in mid-March, it did mean, because most of our projects are quite large, that we ended up postponing those projects because we were not in a position to mount them because of safety regulations. We also postponed a tour, which in April 2021, we had a European tour, which was going to go to the Zagreb Biennale and some other locations in Europe. So that's on hold indefinitely. We looked for ways that we could keep communicating. And we did do some streaming of past projects where we had high quality video. We did stream the last project that we did prior to COVID. And this was a project in the Push International Performing Arts Festival. And that was relatively successful. Actually, there was pick up, and people did watch the project in Australia, Europe, and in Asia. And so it was interesting to see that there was, in fact, a kind of international pickup and curiosity around the world to this streaming that we did. We are also looking at doing some events coming up now in a few months. The first one is towards the end of April, and we keep having to adjust how we're going to do this. So it's we were thinking of doing it live streaming, and of course when we develop the safety plans, because our ensemble is fairly large. Once you get 18, 20 people, you get some film crews in. Suddenly the spaces that we had booked are not large enough, so we're having to move this to a larger space. Also, the budgets that we had constructed were really for a live performance, so did not include all the costs of the streaming and so on. So we're making a lot of adjustments about that, but we do want to get the ensemble together and do a fairly elaborate project called TPE Interactive, which has also electroacoustic components and live interaction of our ensemble. So we are moving ahead with doing that, but we're continually having to adjust how and exactly how it's going to happen. So as COVID hit, I also wanted to work towards developing a kind of COVID-proof project, shall we say, and that's what I'm going to share a little bit about. So let's move to the next slide. And this project is called 1+1+1 and so on. And what it consists of is that each member of our ensemble was invited to develop a work, to choose a composer to write a composition for them, a short 5-minute composition. It's a kind of chain of collaboration, and it goes out. In the first instance, what we're doing is each of these works is being turned into an art film. Some of them are involving other collaborators like dancers, but they're single. They're like solo collaborators, and one person collaborates with another, and then the projects get bigger as other individuals are added. And the nice thing about this is that we didn't have to keep adjusting the project over and over as it went on, because it was really designed as something that could be done by a small number of people. When we've done the film shoots we've done, we just did 2 in the last few days. They've had about 10 people in the rooms that they have been shot, and the locations, and that all fit in quite well within safety plans of, they were actually done in some theater spaces that we had previously rented for concerts, but these projects could be filmed outside or in non-standard locations. So, and I'm sure some will end up being like that. And so the idea is that they will exist as individual films, but they also, we're going to have 15 films which could be shown together, for example, in a film festival, or we could at a later date put them in a live concert. Let's go to the next slide. So I've explained most of this already. So as noted there, there's almost 15 of these projects underway. It's actually keeping all of us quite busy because they're all at somewhat different stages. They're all new works, so composers are active, discussions and planning is active. One film is complete. The 2 others we just filmed, as I said, and they'll go into post-production. So we're going to start by releasing 3 of those early in the new year. And as more projects will be added, we'll keep finding ways to disseminate the work. Next one. So now I'm just going to show for you 2 minutes of the first film, and this is called Synapsis. And so it started with the oboe member of our ensemble, David Owen, and he chose to work with Bob Pritchard, who's a composer at UBC, and actually he's a former oboist, so he's connected to the oboe, and he they did together a work that involves electroacoustic soundtracks and also some sensor technology, and a dancer who you will see in the film, and she has a kind of a structure, a light structure on her back, almost looks like a second skeleton, you'll see, and that is also response to movement. So this is that we haven't released this yet, so this is a little bit of a glimpse into the middle of this piece. I'm going to play for you about 2 minutes of it.
Hey, Ryan, could you go ahead and run that?
Thank you. So not all of the projects are directly addressing COVID, but I would say that it's been very refreshing for everybody to work on these projects and have a chance to collaborate together under COVID. And some of the projects I think will be more directly related to COVID as it goes forward. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Owen. That was terrific. And I guess Renault, we'll turn to you now.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Ublami, Atira, Renault Arluck. So good morning. My name is Renault Arluck. I come to you from Treaty 7 territory here in Banff, Alberta National Park. My mother is Dennis Uslene and Cree from the Fort Chipewyan, Fort Smith region, so Wood Buffalo National Park area. And my father's Inuviali Witquichan from the Inuvik region, so Northwest Territories. I just want to acknowledge that Treaty 7 is the land of the Sutana, the Dene, the Stoney Nakoda, and the Blackfoot, as well as Métis Local 3 and with cross-line nations of Cree and Tanaha. And I've been here for about going into my 4th year now, and I'm quite grateful to be here. I've learned a lot in my time here, getting to know these nations. Like, I've known them as friends and as peers and colleagues in different ways, but to actually be immersed in this land and getting to know what the values and principles are and the teachings that come with this area that are very different from my own. I'm just really grateful to be here for that. So I'm a theater practitioner. I'm a producer, playwright, director, actor, storyteller. I do it all. And I'm the director of Indigenous Arts at Banff Center for Arts and Creativity. I'm going into my 4th year of doing that kind of interdisciplinary arts work. I'm going to chat about how we're doing theater during the pandemic, which is super fun and challenging at the same time. But, you know, we're all very adaptive people. Artists are hyper adaptive. We're really creative, and so we're just finding ways to do it. So one of the examples I'm going to show you is, so I've been working on this, I call it a takeover of Powaggan. It's called Powaggan Macbeth. It's the takeover of Macbeth, using Plains Cree cosmology as the structure of what we're building. I did a workshop in Frog Lake First Nation a number of years ago, and initially we were supposed to do The Tempest. So I was hired to come in for 2 weeks to adapt a Shakespeare play that the young people were studying in their curriculum, and adapt it with their help. And as I was prepping to do that, The Tempest. And then they came back to me and said, well, we don't want to adapt The Tempest. We want to adapt Macbeth, and we want to use the cannibal spirit, Wichiku, as Macbeth. And I was like, oh, this is really intense. One, Macbeth law. And then the other is that the Wichiku actually has teachings with it, known as the Wendigo or Naka or Wendigo, has several different names with several different nations across Canada, the United States. And when I was invited to bring that forward, I thought it would be such a good idea to bring some elders in and have them share stories of that creature, so that that the youth can hear those stories from the elders, but also that the elders could know that the youth were exploring this being as well. And so when we brought the elders and youth together, it ended up being a very powerful storytelling sharing session. And the elders shared stories, and the youth shared stories with the elders of the stories that they know of the land that they're from. And so when we started developing the script, it never really fleshed out the idea of the Wichiku, but what it did was it brought the elders to support the youth in their storytelling. So on the day of the performance, the cultural advisor, Gary Berland, brought in like skirts and shirts for the youth to wear. I think 75 parents and family and different people showed up. And so I was like, oh, well, this is really interesting. We have two really negative forces coming together with such a hugely positive impact. And so when I left that residency, I wonder if this can be done on a professional scale. I'm going to try this out. I'm just going to do this. And so I ripped apart the play and restructured the bones and put it together to like some sort of mangy play. with a lot of Cree cosmology in it and a lot of Cree language. And so every time we came together, we brought elders together and we brought Cree artists together, and the play just started getting more and more infused with Cree knowledge and Cree language, led by Darlene Auger, who's our Cree consultant and Cree language translator. She's amazing. And so then it all gets unified with the same, so we're taking these words, we're putting them together under this correct, correct focus, correct perspective, with Darlene's help. And then it just grew, and then it got commissioned by the Stratford Festival. So I'm being commissioned by them right now. And but I didn't want to stop the telling and the community engagement. So the big part of the work that I do is grassroots community engagement work. Ackpig Theatre's founded on that, and it is the prime focus of who I am as an artist, is making space for an Indigenous voice, which is something I also do at BAM Center. So I didn't want to end the process because it was commissioned. I wanted to keep going. So what we did is we created a community telling version. And so we brought in 6 actors. So instead of the 2.5-hour version play Stratford, I have a 90-minute version, and it's told by 6 actors instead of 26 actors. And what I did is I handed them my script and I said, now rip it apart and make it your own, and tell me the story of this play from your character's perspective, or multiple character perspective. And what we did is we then toured into Treaty 6 territory. So we visited 6 different communities in Treaty 6. And I created a very self-contained theater piece that has like lights, sound, actors, just ghosts, because in those communities there's just not theaters, there's just not there. So you have to build the world for the community, and I thought I'm going to build in the same world that I would build it in non-Indigenous communities. And so we went into 6 different communities, and afterwards, as part of my protocol work, is that we would host a food after. So then afterwards the audience could eat with the company, and we would get to know the community, and the community would get to know us. So we're not just coming in and leaving, so this is really about connecting. So then when we had to go online, we were about to do a 6 community tour in the Northwest Territories, which is my land. We had to postpone it, and we chose to postpone it before all the regulations were in place, because we had thought of our elders and our community members. And so Ackpig just went, you know what, we're not going to do this. There'll be a time when we can do it. Canada Council's flexible now, and we'll just hold on to our touring until we can actually go into those communities. And at this time, everyone was kind of going, how do we go online? How do we go online? And so one of the ones that stepped up was the National Arts Centre did #CanadaPerforms, and they perform music, readings, and theater. And so we were asked to submit, and I was like, okay, so now we're going to have a 3rd version of Powaggan Macbeth, which is the Zoom version. And so what we did is I brought the 6 actors back, and we did rehearsals like this, but you know, we all have limited engagement time for this space. So I did 3-hour rehearsals over 5 days, and we came up with 20 minutes of material of actual directing that I did with the actors. And then the other half we spent just talking about our experience of being on the land and being into the community. So we did 50 minutes of a performance for Canada Performs. So what I'm going to show you is just a little like 3-minute clip of how we did that.
Okay, Ryan, can you share that?
Peace! Matugo-san comes near. We must hide ourselves in the trees as we wait to feed his insatiable hunger so that we may feed ourselves.
They came at the end of our great battle. They'd stayed behind to offer tobacco. I thought them scavengers at first, until one yowled at me my title of worthy young man. I looked closer, caught by the accuracy of their snouts, and they transformed into mangled humans, and then they spoke.
Gakstimit oskini go you are, and war chief next.
By a full moonlight, and when day becomes night, A greater chief than we past them you will be.
By the way, tell your friend Mutsapio that his son, Kainisit, will be chief.
When the snow falls, your pawagan calls.
And then they were gone. Musapio's son will be chief. I will be war chief. And Ogamau too. Yes. And just then my cousin Kimutsapio appeared.
Don't say Matsuko-san. Okimawa Pastim was pleased to hear of your latest win, Matsuko-san. And as Sinipwat ally came and shared the story of your vicious slaughter against our enemies, the Mighty Bloods. You know, he was surprised to hear the raid of the Pigawiniwak, but not surprised to hear you butchered every one of them. Our chief battle cried. "Ah!" It echoed through the mountains and shook the snow off the trees.
Oh, la.
For once again, defending our territory, warrior cousin. This gift is for you. Our chief had me come name you from Kaki Smido Skinigu to war chief. And he wanted to let you know that the best stallion is yours. I
am humbled, cousin. Oh. Before I went on my fast to learn of my Pawagan, we were suffering, families lost, it was cold. You know this. I had dreamt that the hills around me had become heads of bears and they were alive. And I could feel their breath, hot. And when I awoke, I was surrounded by ice. Yes, if chance will have me chief, then chance can name me that. I will not fight.
Hey, war chief, your stallion awaits you. Gueho.
And then we left for Chief Wabustum's camp.
Tanse, you all know me. I am Ogamau Wabustum. Called you all here for a special occasion. I bring with me my...
All right, and so that was our Zoom performance.
Great.
So what we did was we used, I'm not a fan of the fake background, and I didn't want to just have like a fake black background. So we had the actors build the world with candles and mood lighting. And then we used them in and out of the scene, like using this camera as like part of that angle work. And then we thought we'd play with shadow puppetry, because it's a big part of the work that I do as an artist, is that nice textural kind of connection to theater. And so we did one Zoom room as like a little shadow space, which actually really built and allowed the story to be amplified. The other half of it, with the actors just talking about their experiences, was really informed by Alison Pratt, who played Quanihuda, which is Lady Macbeth. Quanihuda in Plains Cree is Wandering Woman. And so we renamed all of the characters after the Cree names that described who they are in the play. So Matsuko-san is actually evil son in Plains Cree, but Macbeth actually translated to evil son also. And so that was kind of the process there. And so what we did is we decided that digital media is about connection, not perfection. And so the reason I really like when things are a little gritty, because I think that allows us to have more engagement, or allows our human spirit and our human empathy to engage a little bit deeper. If something's really polished, I feel like sometimes it creates a barrier of that. So it's about connection, not perfection. And that's kind of the work that I've been doing ever since. I've done other theater work too, but I just want to be thoughtful of time, and I love Q&A. So just, yeah, really thank you and really appreciative of my time here. Really inspired by my my panel peers, and thank you so much for joining us today. Masi choku.
Great. Thank you. That was terrific. All the panelists was really, really great. So we have about 15 minutes, just about, for some discussion, which is great. I did, before we dive in, wanted to, again, apologize. I was a little discombobulated in the beginning there, talking about being raw and gritty. It's my mistakes. And I forgot to mention, again, that the website project that I'm and my group is heading up. So if you're interested and have projects you want to get involved on this website, it's again focused on COVID and creative work. I've just posted in the chat there the website, or sorry, the email. You can email either projects or talk with me about it. It's covidcreative2020@gmail.com. So again, apologies for that, and I'll turn it over. Questions, thoughts, comments? I have lots, but maybe I'll start. Renault, I have a very simple question, and forgive me if you said this, but were all those actors across the country, or were they in the same? Oh, okay.
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah, so we had to do rehearsals at a certain time. So one thing I know that we're all a part of now is, like, we do 4 a.m. panels sometimes now, or we do 8 o'clock panels now because of time differences. So Alison Pratt is Cree from Alexander Reserve, and she's currently in Toronto. So she's out in that Haudenosaunee area. And then we had Joel and Mitch and Sophie and Caitlin and Aaron all in BC, Shimsham, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam territory. And so then we were in Treaty 7 territory. So we were all together reconvening at a time that was mutually acceptable for all of us.
Yeah, so that's an interesting challenge with, you know. Other thoughts or questions?
I'll jump in. I'm Pauline Samashima from Lakehead University. It's so fantastic to be here, and I think the 3 presentations were super inspiring. I'll just have to say, Jennifer, I have the same desk that you have. I'm sitting at the same desk, and I've just started needle punching for my research work, and thinking that, you know, this maybe is a time of a return to that kind of work. I don't know what that is. I mean, stuff that you can do in the house at home with people all around, you know. Anyway, that's exciting. And I've started doing this foam clay stuff on shields, and it adheres fantastically. So I'm so excited about your work. And then, oh, and I did a project with Julia, who's a trumpet player. Her last name's missing, but she did some work with Bob Pritchett as well. And so I'm watching your work thinking, oh my gosh, you know, there's just so many connections, and exciting and thrilling. Renault, I think that the work that you're doing just is such a reminder of the resiliency that we, you know, humanity has in this time. I really loved what was so intriguing about watching your piece was the body underneath the central square, the puppet part, but it just looked like his shirt came out, and then his body was there and it was moving. And I was just so fascinated with that idea, and the idea of, you know, playing around with the interconnection even while they were at a distance. I think that's just so fantastic. And Sean, I just met your brother. He was at Lakehead not long ago. So I feel like there's like all these connections, and I'm so glad, so very glad for all the work that's happening, and it's super inspiring. Thank you. I don't really have a specific question. Of course, there's a million questions, but thank you.
I would also like to acknowledge your sentiments. I was really impressed by my colleague's presentation. Such beautiful work. We are all just reinventing how we go about doing the things that we're compelled to do. Like, it's a compulsion, right? These creative acts. My question is actually for Sean, who is the chair of this panel. You're also an artist, Sean. What type of work are you making in the age of COVID?
Again, I did have a slide I was going to share, but so one of the things I'm interested in is working actually with my brother, Timothy Caulfield, who does a lot of work around misinformation and health. And so I did a series of prints that sort of responded to some of his research around misinformation. And they were kind of combined with text and image sort of things. That the main goal, actually, in a way, and he then shared them on social media, and the main goal in a way was to get people to think about pausing and stopping. I think one of the challenges, and maybe this is one of the great roles that art has, right, is it makes people think at a different pace. And that was sort of the goal. I think one of the challenges with misinformation is people share so quickly, right? And I thought if I could create images, even images that don't like aren't literal or direct, but that just make people pause for a moment, this could maybe be an interesting conversation. So that's one of the things I'm working on, Jennifer. Yeah. And I have some other questions myself, but anyone else?
I have a question, if I'm able to jump in. My name is Mackenzie Thomas. I am a project lead at the National Circus School, and we created a entrepreneurship and innovation lab this year, and we've worked with a lot of artists on different projects that help them start something in this time and help them, dedicate more time to work on that. I'm really interested in asking Renault and Owen, and also Jennifer, if you've had any challenges working with, well, moving artists from an offline space into an online space, because we've found that challenge with performance arts, and it's been easy to translate it into a COVID time during the summer when we were able to perform outside, but now we're moving into winter. So that's going to be more challenging, especially in Quebec and Ontario. So I'm interested to know if you have any tips or advice on how to kind of navigate that space for the artists who are resistant to the technology. Thanks.
Well, we've found that we need much larger spaces than we otherwise would before to bring people together safely. So that's one thing. And we need, it's actually a good thing, I would say, a lot more technological collaborators than we might normally have to help facilitate some of the things we're trying to do. But it's a work in progress, and scale is interesting. That's one of the reasons we went down to this 1+1 project. And what I was showing is it's at a scale which allows us to, work together safely, right? Inside also, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there are, the only thing I could think of is that at BAM Center, the Christopher House is our dance artistic director, and he hosted a 3-day workshop on choreography, and every dancer worked within their Zoom space, and then they did shared performances for each other, solo performances. And that ended up being a really incredible experience for all of the dancers. Like, I actually just chatted with one of them the other day randomly and said that he really enjoyed it. So I think sometimes we could look at the scope as a large scope, but just maybe it's like a little bite. So maybe it's just like, let's connect for like 1 or 2 days. Let's see what happens. Let's explore that. And then, kind of grow into it. Because digital media, the term itself is quite overwhelming. And when you have a performance focus and you're so used to live and the energy being what it is, I mean, can we say that we can get there? I believe we can, but we just need to figure out what that is. And the pressure is that we're supposed to be perfect, right? So we're so excellent at what we do. And then when you put us in this world, we're supposed to be as excellent as we are in the other world. And that's actually not true. And so I always look at how can we create a space that feels safe and supported, but with also letting go of that mega type A brain that we all have with ourselves. And so it would just be like, maybe let's try it out for a day, for 2 days. You don't have to be perfect. There's people here that are going to help you and support you.
Great.
I really want to reiterate what you said. In fact, earlier in your presentation, you said also that sometimes theater can be more accessible when there's these moments that aren't perfect, right? So I work with a lot of students. I'm teaching right now. I also work with a lab research group. So those are maybe more experienced, but still emerging researchers. And then I collaborate and work with a lot of people at later phases in their careers. And so a few things that we've been doing is, like you just said, is we've been going with lower commitment, maybe also lo-fi. We've been doing a lot of hand-drawn, like, and people will be like, oh, what do you think about that? Or, and then, you know, like sort of like just allowing ways for people who maybe are less fluent with the technology to engage creatively still. I will also say that we had Thanksgiving dinner with my mother-in-law via Zoom, and she had never been on Zoom before, and we had a lovely time. So I think also if you can just sort of walk individuals through the steps, maybe on a one-on-one level, to at least get them to this point that we're having right now, then you can play out baking or doodling or the chicken dance, or do you know what I mean? Like you can sort of start slow baby steps once you get everybody to at least be able to get online.
Yeah.
All right. That was great discussion. We have, I guess, a couple of minutes left, and I have a related question for Jennifer. I'm curious about your performances and what kind of reactions you're getting in the public spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, people think I'm nuts, but that's okay. I get a lot of people who approach me. Some people get afraid of me because they also think maybe I'm contaminated, like maybe I'm, or mentally ill. So there's often those responses, but there's also, I often have like a film crew or a photographer with me. So I think that also gives people a sense of what might be happening. Also, because Windsor is a smaller city, people often assume that you have, like we get all the time, people come up to me and say, are you with the university? And then I say, yes. And so that sort of just digests for people what's happening. I'll also say kids like my outfit the best. And it is reflective. So we had a dance party in front of my car with the lights turned on one night, and the light bounced all over the neighborhood and all over the houses, and the neighbors came out and danced with us as well. It was really lovely.
Oh, nice.
That's great. All right, we're at 11:29. Any last questions?
I'd just like to say thank you. It was really great to meet you both and to see the work. And thank you, Sean, for bringing us together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. It was really a great experience. So thank you so much. And I guess we're at time. So again, do keep in touch. The emails in the chat. And we'd love to hear from you if you have projects that might relate to COVID in any way. Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Merci.
Nice to see you, Louise.
Yes, Jennifer. I mean, not seen for a long time.
Maybe 10 years. It was really sweet.
Yes, certainly. Yes. Yes. It seems you are doing very well.
Yes, thank you.
And I just heard that you got 2 daughters, twins, I suppose.
Yes, we have twin 5-year-olds.
Wow, yes, I've seen them. They're tall, and certainly makes a big difference in your life.
It does.
As an artist, but also right now with the COVID. Huh?
Yeah, it's been very intense, but it's also been wonderful. You to spend more time with them and that type of thing. But we're tired. We're really tired.
Oh, yes, I can imagine. Happy also to see that you still work in by your heart.
Yeah, I'm just it's become my lifelong discussion, right?
That's what I see, yes. And well, happy to see that you're still in link with Jens Hauser too.
Yes.
He was on one of your
Jens, yes. Yeah, he was in one of he was the last person we just had in for a workshop. It was lovely. And I saw it. So you're with the Fonds de Recherche Québec Society. So, but you're not with the university anymore?
No, I'm in my 6th year at the Fonds de Recherche as the scientific director of Society and Culture, which involves art and literature and so on.
That sounds wonderful.
Yes, I'm very happy here. I mean, it's totally different.
Yes.
With absolute different network. But well, I was happy to to see that there was something on art and COVID at the Royal Society, and well, to see that you out there, that you were presenting, very good. Yes.
Well, it was lovely to see you again.
Yeah.
I hope to see you soon. Take care.
Yes. Continue your extraordinary work.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Bye.